Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Artists and Studio Programs here at Baltimore Clayworks, and we are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from my office located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual artist talk given today by Pete Pinnell. Peter earned a BA degree studying music at Columbia College in Columbia, Missouri, a BFA in art at the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University, an MFA in art from the University of Colorado at Boulder. For the first 12 years of his career, Pinnell made his living as a studio potter. During this time, he taught part-time at the Kansas City Art Institute and at the Johnson County Community College in Kansas. In 1995, he joined the faculty at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. In the ensuing years, he and his colleagues built a nationally recognized ceramics program. The U.S. News and World Report ranks the UNL Graduate Ceramics Program as one of the top 10 in the country. In addition to his teaching, he exhibits widely, and his artwork is found in notable collections, including the Frederick R. Wiseman Art Gallery in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the Sheldon Art Museum in Lincoln, Nebraska. From 2008 to 2014, he held the honorary college title of Hickson Lead Professor of Ceramics in recognition of his professional record. Pinnell enjoys researching the history, technology, and aesthetics of ceramics, which informs both his creative work as well as his teaching. He has spoken on these topics at a number of major ceramic conferences, including NCECA and Utilitarian Clay. Over the last 30 years, his writing and his work have appeared in Ceramics Monthly, Studio Potter, Clay Times, and Ceramics Art and Perception. At the University of Nebraska, Pinnell served as a chair of the Department of Art and Art History from 2011 to 2016. During that time, he led the department through the reaccreditation process, superheaded the creation of expanded design program with 2 new bachelor's degree, created a new department of digital lab, and oversaw the creation of student-run gallery. Pinnell's record as a teacher extends beyond the university. During his career, he has taught professional workshops at Anderson Ranch, Aramont, Penland, the Archie Bray Foundation, over 20 colleges and universities, and at numerous community art centers. Pinnell has been active in service outside the university. From 2012 to 2016, he was involved in art accreditation, serving as a site visitor for the National Association of Schools of Art and Design. From 2019 to 2023, he served as the board of directors of NCECA, the National Council on Education in the Ceramic Arts, including 2 years as president of the board. For more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org and tune in for our next artist talk on Tuesday, December 9th with Catherine Pond Cooper, our current Embark Fellow from 1:30 to 2. I will now turn it over to Pete.
I'm going to start with this picture. I'm the second one from the left on the couch, one of 7 kids, grew up in a big family in Missouri. And when I talk about influences on me as a human being and also on my work, I really couldn't overstate the influence of being from a big family and being close to these people and the kind of support that it's always given me. I actually originally studied music, then I got interested in art, then got into pottery. And from the very beginning with pottery, there were certain historical pieces. I don't know where I saw them in books, obviously, because I didn't travel internationally when I was a college student. This is a Sung Dynasty vase from the Percival David collection in London. I've since seen it there a couple of times. This is a Qing Dynasty copper red vase on porcelain. As you can see, that previous one is from the Sung Dynasty. I'm not sure if I said that. And this is a Lungjuan Celadon wine ewer against late Southern Sung Dynasty. And I show you these because, to me, in my mind, if you would have asked me as a student, how would you describe beauty in ceramics, this would have been it. And my interest was really about everything having to do with it. I was interested in the history, the processes, the technology, and the objects themselves, both as visual objects, but also as utilitarian objects, the kinds of objects that you could interact with. So this is the one undergraduate pot I'm going to put in there. This is from my senior year at Alfred, and it's just a smallish jar, 11 or 12 inches high, or medium-sized jar with wheel throne. And this is then skipping forward a few years from my MFA show. As a graduate student, I tried making other kinds of more sculptural, less utilitarian work. And I went to a program that really pushed people to work in more sculptural ways. But I found that for me, I was really missing something when I didn't get to interact with the work after the firing. It wasn't enough for me to put it on the wall or set it on a table. So wheel throne, altered, monochromatic glazing, um, definitely the kinds of things that you can see those Chinese influences there. This is me and my wife and I when we first met when I was finishing my master's degree. And if I'm going to talk about influences on my career, honestly, I wouldn't be a potter. I wouldn't have been able to live the wonderful life that I have if that woman hadn't been next to me every step of the way. And I tell my students the secret to having a long, successful career in ceramics is to marry the right person. So I really have to dedicate this to Julie. So this is very early in my career, and it gives you an overview. Early on, I was a studio potter. Uh, I worked first in Iowa and then in Kansas City. And this is Julie helping me set up for an art fair. This is one of the first years I was doing this at an Art in the Park at the Des Moines Art Center. But it gives you a snapshot of the kind of work I was making right out of graduate school. And this was just a few years later at a different outdoor art fair. And it also speaks there to the issues with being a studio potter at that time. I know people now sell probably a lot more online than in situations like this. But for me, this was how you made your living. All those leaves were because I was assigned a spot that was a mud hole out in this field. And my wife and my friends ran to and from a nearby woods with garbage bags picking up leaves so that people would step into the booth. The other thing was that this particular fair, they had all the potters crammed together. So everybody's work kind of competed with everyone else's. I a potter making lamps to one side, a different potter to the other. But ignoring all of that, you can see the kinds of glazes I was using, the kinds of forms I was making, the proportions, all of that. I think this is a nice little snapshot of the late 80s for me. This is a pot from that era. Again, I've always been interested in the technology of ceramics, and so I was did a lot of research on glazes, and so this was a glaze that I invented during that time. Another one is a high temperature light purple glaze. And again, going with that idea of interaction, it was fun to do things like think about what would go in these, then try them out, right? What would wine look like against particular glazes or colors? This is a vase, which I still have. I kept because I loved that little red spot, but also because I took it to a couple of art fairs and people kept picking it up and they'd like lick a thumb and try to wipe that off. And I think that speaks to the difference. And it was one of those realizations for me that I think all potters have at some point or another, is that your audience and your customers often aren't the same people. And you make your living from your customers, but your audience may be someone else. And maybe your customers don't appreciate everything you make or all of what you really love. So I just decided in the end to keep that. This is a wine ewer. Uh, my friend Victor Babu, who taught at the Kansas City Art Institute, made ewers, and I wasn't even aware of them before he introduced me to that idea. But they're a historical pot for serving wine. And I loved making these for just the compositional reasons. But also then I had this realization when I would pull out a wine, we'd have another couple over for dinner or something. You pull out a ewer, you pour wine out of it. Suddenly that becomes a very, very special liquid. It's no longer that cheap Australian wine or something that you picked up for $6 a bottle. When it comes out of the right pot, it's special. This is just a smaller 6, 7 inch diameter Red Bull. And but again, at this point, at about the time of that second uh, art fair shot, I was doing a lot with glaze on glaze to experiment with you having these very regular forms, but irregular application of one glaze on another. Another thing I was exploring at the time was the chemical interactions that could occur between one glaze and another. So this is a green glaze just splatted onto a clear glaze that's responsive to the copper. So the red forms just as the white glaze capturing copper from the green glaze that vaporizes out. And it's fun. I've always enjoyed working with systems like that to set up and then let things happen in the kiln. By the early 90s, I'd been working in porcelain for over 10 years, and honestly, it was losing its freshness to me. And at the same time, I was teaching part-time at the Kansas City Art Institute and spending time at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. And this is a Zhou Dynasty bronze from about the 10th century BC. And I looked at those Chinese bronzes and I just thought they were amazing. So I did really a crazy thing. And I just started working in earthenware, decorating pots, and using terra sigillata and patina finishes so that I wouldn't be glazing over these patterns. And I have to say, I really enjoyed that. And I luckily, got a good response from people who were kind of shocked to see this at first. But over the next few years, I started to develop more in terms of surface vocabulary, patterns and textures, and how to integrate that with the form itself. So now I'm going to revisit. About the mid 90s is when I started teaching full time, and also when my one of my sisters, Peggy, got married. And so I love this quick family portrait of, so there's the 8 of us here. Mom's the second one from the left. But here we were joking around, decided to line up chronologically in Peggy's backyard before her wedding. Not chronologically, sorry, by size. Now I'm right in the middle. Again, I'm right in the middle in age and I'm right in the middle in height. So mom is still passed on, is now passed on, but the rest of us, what I love about this group is that we get together now every other Wednesday evening via Zoom and just spend an hour, touch base, have fun, talk about whatever, and then we all say goodbye and leave. And it's wonderful. I say they've had an enormous influence. So I took a job at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln in 1995, and I realized right away that the pressure on me was different than it had been as a studio potter. It was to try to make more interesting, more complex pieces rather than more pieces. So I could pressure it both allowed me to spend more time on each pot, but also almost required me so it could try to be showing my work in higher level arenas than art fairs. And so I was still working in earthenware, doing a lot of work with pattern and uh, combinations of surfaces. When a year after getting there, I was invited to go to Yixing, China. That was 1996. This was at a time, this is an Yixing Chinese teapot, an important historical work in the shape of a pumpkin. Um, and I'd been looking at pots like this the whole time I'd been making pots. I've always been in love with Yixing teapots. So to go to I Ching was really amazing, and it changed my trajectory in a number of ways. One of them was up to anybody who was a potter in the 70s or 80s will recognize this. But the push on me, the pressure on me was to always make work that was loose. And you could look at that porcelain work I was making, and everything was, in fact, I was purposely trying to be refined and dial in all the forms and the surfaces and the detailing. And the image that I always got from others is that my work was way over on the edge. That, I was on this really tight, at the very edge of as far as you could go in that direction. And then I went to I Ching and I realized my work was in the middle. Those people were so much more refined and controlled. And it was like being given permission. I realized, and as a teacher, that's one of those things I carry to this day is you give the student permission to be who they are, not what the style at this point would demand that they be. So I came back, and as a new academic, I gave myself an assignment, which was to use only I Ching hand building techniques for a year, no potter's wheel. And so I made a lot of teapots like this one, small. This is probably 3 cups or something in scale, all slab built, all hand built. And after a year and a half, then I went back to the wheel, but it took my work in a new direction, more formal, I think, a little more reserved in terms of surface. That was a pretty good sized jar, 12 or 13 inches high. This is a tall vase. This was close to a lidded vase, really, close to 18 inches tall, and it's thrown and altered and textured. And this is a wine ewer. Again, I keep going back to this form, both because I like its formal qualities, but also I like interacting with these, like I do with teapots. Uh, this is a stoneware mug from a Peter Bruegel painting, The Wedding Feast. And I show this that a lot of us have admired these beautiful cups and mugs in the Bruegel paintings, but also as an introduction to something that had been that I found interesting as a teacher back then, which was soda firing, which was sort of the contemporary version of salt firing, what they were doing there. So I had a brief residency out at the Bray Foundation in 99, and I started working in soda and enjoying the way that alters things. And it was my colleague, Eddie Dominguez, who walked into my studio one day and said, I'm looking at these textures you're doing on your work, and it reminds me of the farm fields that I drive past in the morning. And it was one of those aha moments because honestly, what most people would call bleak, I've always called beautiful, which is the winter landscape in the Midwest. But I love these textures and the way things like crop residue describes the flow of the land. And so once I had that realization, I decided to more consciously let those influences enter my work. So this is a postcard I did for an exhibition. Another thing I'd always been looking at and always liked are these Japanese tetsubin, the cast iron kettles for boiling water and to make tea. The attenuated, exaggerated sense of form that you can do with metals has always attracted me. The way that handle can be so exaggerated and the knob, going to such a small point before it enlarges again. Plus the texture and even this very subdued cast iron color, I think, are quite beautiful. So all this came together, and at times I've enjoyed going back to just reducing, trying to say, okay, if I want to do what I'm going to do, what can I take out? Can I just take away the ornament, take away a lip, take away what can I take away and still retain everything I'm trying to say? Can I talk about winter landscape without putting grass on it? Can I do it with texture? So this is a teapot from a time in the mid 2000s, first decade. And this is another. I did a series of these dry soda fired teapots and cups and you can see everything from Ishing teapots to Tetsuban to the um, Korean tea bowls, on and on. All of that is there, but it's all just vocabulary or really influences that show up within the work. And I haven't mentioned this, baskets. I happen to see a fantastic um, Japanese basket show when I was traveling about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And that has found its way into the work as well. Throughout all of this, to me, an important part of my work has always been that interaction, what happens between the object and the viewer. So just like the Yixing teapots pour so well, I've always tried to get a flawless pour and then create a mug, a cup, a tea bowl, whatever, that made you conscious of the act of drinking. And that's one of the things these fluted tea bowls do because it acts a little bit like a spout. So it funnels the tea into your mouth in a way that's a bit unexpected. And I think, unlike just a normal round lip like that, which tends to slow down and broaden that flow. And I think doing anything to change the interaction between your lip and that flow and your expectations makes you more aware of that interaction of what you're drinking, and I think a lot of what we're trying to do as potters, one of the reasons that people love having handmade pots, even if they know nothing about them, is how it enriches the interaction between the object and the viewer. This is a little tea bowl of that kind. And cup and saucer. And like a lot of potters, when I have an idea, I enjoy taking it across, different scales, different types of objects, everything from a plate to a vase to see how I can take advantage of that. This is an I Ching teapot, and occasionally I'll go back. I have some really good historic books of teapots. And these are, of course, were very small. There is something about this. I think of it to myself as the I Ching challenge. They've removed on many of these everything extraneous. There's nothing extra there. So everything that's there is done by hand. I mean, I show these to my students and I say, this is hand built. And they're just, no, yeah, this is hand built. No molds, no any, few basic tools, and you get something like this. And so I have occasionally tried to just consciously take the I Ching challenge. So this was a more American scale teapot made out of earthenware with a terra sig. The I Ching pots are cone 6 oxidation. So I was redoing it at a lower temperature. But again, taking my ideas, my forms, my sets of proportions that I'm interested in, but reducing it, taking out everything that's non-essential and just getting it down to those basics. But of course, I like to put things back in. One of the things I've enjoyed from time to time is making brass handles. And I first saw this on teapots in I Ching. And so I will buy just strips of brass and cut them and hammer them out and bend them. And it's one way that I can explore some of that attenuated sense of form that you get from a Japanese tetsuban. So that the cast iron can do, you can also do with brass for something like this. And I've also done them in different forms. So rather than just one piece that goes from thin to narrow to thin, or yeah, or narrow to wide to narrow. There, I got it. I've enjoyed making ones that use different designs, and something like this that has two tines allows it to stay standing up all the time, and it keeps it out of the heat, and it makes it nice to pick up and pour with. And this is again soda fired stoneware. And in 2011, and I can tell you exactly what year, I decided to play with porcelain just a bit again. And then I spent 5 years as department chair, which is one of those hazards that you sometimes risk if you're in academia, as you get pushed out of your comfort zone. But for a variety of reasons, I needed to say yes to that. And as a result, I barely touched clay for 5 years. In fact, I know there was at least one year in which I never touched it once. So, and that's the academic life. I mean, that's what it means sometimes. I tell my students, remember, if you become a teacher, you're not going to be an artist anymore except part-time. And there are going to be times when you're just a teacher or just an academic. You're no longer being an artist. Uh, and I liken it, especially when you're teaching, it's like working in a kitchen and preparing all this beautiful food and never getting to eat it. You teach the students to do all these things and then you don't get to do them. But it's worth it. It's a great occupation, but it's worth it to keep in mind. This is another one I did right before I became department chair. So then when I stopped 5 years later, this was one of the first pots I made. And I decided out of the blue, I had students using an old glaze of mine I called Pete Strontium matte, but a lot of people know it as weathered bronze. So I thought, well, I haven't used that really since the 80s, so I'll put that to good use here. Um, and it was fun to go back after years and realize I didn't have anything. I could just start and do anything I wanted. So I did a couple of residencies. One of them, I went back to the Bray for a short residency, and I explored just altering I use 3 pounds of porcelain, small serving bowls in different ways, and exploring both how I could alter form and also how to detail it. This is a close up, a detail of that particular bowl. And I love working with detail. I think that's pretty clear. And it was fun to just explore that, to not think on a macro level, but just think on an exploratory level. A year after that, right before COVID, I got to go to Berlin and spend time at a place called Zentrum for Ceramic. If you're ever looking for an overseas residency, I would 100% recommend the Center for Ceramics in Berlin. But I would spend my days in museums and then go back to the studio in the evening and make pots. And this is a teapot I made there. In particular, I used a brick clay, a cone six dense orange stoneware that I have to say I really liked. In fact, I don't cover this at all in the show because it's new, but that's what I'm using right now is a stoneware body that I've made out of Nebraska brick clay. Now, and this is just some of the things I've been looking at the last few years. This is again a Tetsuban on a brazier for making tea, Japanese. Um, this is a Japanese, and I can't tell you the name of the maker now because I don't have my notes, but it's a contemporary. Oh, I know it. Remember, it's the Suzuki family. It's cast iron, and they make these absolutely gorgeous cast iron jars. And this is a Kyuzu, a little side-handled teapot. And I have not been able to find out the maker on this. But again, like those I Ching teapots, I like the way this has been reduced to just the essentials. And it's the balance of it, the way it's detailed, the way all the little parts come together so flawlessly. I think that's just a really gorgeous pot. I would use that in my home. So there's a tea caddy that's about 11 inches tall. And it's out of a chocolate stoneware I used for a couple of years. And the same chocolate stoneware, I decided to revisit those basket shaped teapots, and I've made a number of these. And through all of this, I still play with glazes and try to then think about what's the best form for a particular glaze to take advantage of its quality. So if it's moving, but moving slowly, you could do that, right? So that's something I continue to play with. And then finally, this is my family, my wife Julie and I, and our three kids. This was a quick outside portrait last year out in the front yard, and luckily the creative genes have gotten passed down. My son Sam turned it into a digital family. So thank you.